Okay, welcome. Tonight we will be doing chapter 10 of the Bhagavad Gita, the Vibhuti Yoga, the Yoga of Divine Emanations. So before we go into the content, I want to speak something about the nature of the journey, because for most of us Westerners, this aspect of the Gita is not available to us. Very few people in the West open up to God, to the collective consciousness in an experiential way that's being revealed here. Most spiritual teachings are around of a different nature that have more to do with the development of the psychic intelligence and its relationship to truth. This is truly devotional. It doesn't mean that there aren't vast majority of people who have a devotional relationship or feeling for whatever God or Allah or Zoroaster represents for them. This is actually coming from something in our human nature that is transferring onto an idea, something from the human collective consciousness. This is of a different order than what we're going to be talking about today. This is a direct revelation from the universe into the individual. Of course, what we might call devotion is absolutely felt, but of a complete different order than what we would call religious devotion, or the fervor that occurs like in born-again Christians, or people who are motivated from their vital for this passionate relationship, for this idea of God. That comes from the higher heart, the higher vital, the part of our human nature that is rising up from our focus on our relationships and our attachments and our identification associated with society and community. It's a part of us that lifts to a possibility. So it is, to some extent, associated with what I would call the psychic heart. That is, there's a part of us, through even our human feeling for God or church or religion, that has a truth to it. And there's not to be diminished. I know I experienced this as a young man, and I experienced this both as being raised as a Catholic. At one point, I felt I was going to be a priest and was in a seminary school for a year. And in my first introduced to a spiritual teacher with Meher Baba, that was a devotional feeling that was true. It is true, but it's not of the same order that's being revealed in these chapters. And how do I know? Because that's what happened to me. It's of a complete different order. And I don't read much about this here in the West, although people have apparent glimpses of this, where there are ecstatic relationship with something much larger than themselves, and for periods of time, days, months, even years, these ecstatic relationships can be occurring, and you have visions. These are indication that this dimension is trying to reveal itself to that person. But here in the West, because it's we're in an era of the Kali Yuga, where the consciousness is focused on matter. And therefore, on the focus of matter, mind has been developed and enhanced. And so there has been we live in an atmosphere that is more secular. And you can tell this, those of you who have some degree of opening, when you go to India, because there's a definite atmospheric feeling, as if God is closer than here in the West. Well, here in the West, there's a gap. It's my experience that I have to ascend through a period of awarenesses before I encounter what's easily available in India. So the nature of this particular chapter is it's beginning to reveal something of the nature of the transmission of the universe as it comes into a receptive vehicle. And this idea of Vibhuti, or emanation, is very strong in the Hindu culture. Every mantra in the Hindu culture evokes a quality of the universal force, and it can be felt in one's system that has opened up sufficiently. And it usually works first through the psychic, and even the mental, then opening the psychic, and then opens up an opening to the source of the force itself, which arises from a much higher plane in the middle kingdom than usual. And this force tangibly can be felt in your body and change whatever your body was feeling prior to that. So mantras have become, here in the West, a useful entry point into this domain of the emanations of the universal that are coming. So when my awakening occurred, I was, that's what I opened up to, although not the first night. But subsequently, the experiences that were coming, they would just keep coming in. And they were all of a different, absolutely different order than anything that I had any experience, and that each one was unique. Each time this occurred, there was a unique, complete enthrallment in that particular revelation that was coming that would affect all parts of me, my body, my vital nature, and my mind. And there was this overwhelming bliss and awe and incredible delight, ananda, that was of such a different energetic order than anything before. I had no frame of reference. And of course, the nature of it is it would come and then it would go, or quiet. And then it would come again. In my particular case, when I quit being quite so busy, it would come again and it would be a complete different vibration, a complete different revelation. It would come in each time. When I went to India, the first thing my teacher began to do is introduce me to this whole series of ceremonies and mantras, that all of which evoked these universal forces. And this is very, very strong in the Indian culture. And one of these was the 1,000 names of Vishnu. So these 1,000 names of Vishnu, Vishnu representing Krishna, or the manifesting, sustaining force of the universe, there would be, each name evoked a different vibration. So when you did the 1,008 names, you were actually evoking 1,008 different pieces, different rays of the universal that would be possibly to evoke. Of course, there's many more mantras than those 1,000. And for years, I learned to do these mantras. And I did them very poorly at first. It took me a long time to get them. But after a while, I got something started happening. It took years. I did this particular ceremony every single day that I was in India for many years, often poorly, by the evaluation of fellow ashramites who were Indian, who listened to my Western mantras and were However, for me, it worked great. And it kept working great. And then at one point, I was able to regularly access this force. And it's not going away. I've taught this to other people here in the West. But this is indication of this whole area of being able to tap into the universe and the possibilities of, one, accessing them through your own effort, and secondly, the revelation of these that could occur spontaneously for some people, much more in India than here, when they're at a certain stage of the spiritual awakening. These forces bring you into connection with what we call divine love, the worship of divine. And the feeling is intoxication of and enthrallment. And when you're in these states, you're actually partaking of the consciousness of which these sources come from. So you experience yourself as godlike, as divine, as a manifestation of that particular aspect for a period of time, minutes or hours. Sometimes it can linger. There were people in the ashram where they would just sort of float across the ashram because they were in this state of connection to the God plane, we call it. They were in God ecstasy, and everything was oneness. Everything was beauty. Everything was divine delight. And they lived in that until they encountered their ego, and then all went to shit. But until then, it was an introduction to the nature of this dimension I call the Middle Kingdom. I don't want to dismiss this. Anyone who's come to the first awakening of the self, or the Brahman, is an incomplete awakening without the expanding into this area of the body and the emotional nature. And then there are universal forces that can enter, I would say, more deeply into the system. And this is different than a Kundalini awakening, because a Kundalini awakening does activate many of these bliss and delight states. But these that come from the Vibhutis, the emanations, they come from the top down, not the bottom up. And although when it comes down from the top down, it will activate the matching from the bottom, so the two come together. So when one is inspiring for divine, reaching up to it with their heart nature, the universe is trying to enter and respond to it. And in that process, the two eventually could come together. In my case, I wasn't consciously aspiring. It was coming in, but it was causing a rising within my own system. So it was awakening my Kundalini in the process. So this may be a distinction that's not that important unless perhaps you're looking at where you are in the journey. So let's go on into this chapter now. It will be a relatively short chapter because in this chapter, Krishna, who represents the Supreme Being, is revealing his nature directly. Now for us, we're just going to be reading Sanskrit names, so for many of these verses, it's just a lot of Sanskrit names. But they do have relevancy to qualities that we all have some relationship to in our human experience. So take that into account as we go forward to this. And one thing you should know, in the dynamics of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna, who was a warrior, this was a time before religion. He was well, I can't say that wasn't true. Not in the case of Arjuna. This was the time where his focus had been on his battling and his skill as a human being working in the world, and he enlists the help of Krishna to fight this battle. And so when he collapsed, Krishna came forward to present something to Arjuna that wasn't in his normal consciousness. At this stage of the journey, Krishna is beginning to impact Arjuna's system powerfully. And as Arjuna's system is being affected powerfully, it's affecting Krishna. So this is a divine relationship. And in this chapter, Krishna is in intoxication, you might say. He is revealing his nature in a way relatively unique in the Gita for these chapters 9, 10, and 11. And it's in response to this opening that's occurring in Arjuna. It is how it works. The universe falls in love with us, we fall in love with the universe, and it's a divine romance. Or we fall in love with the universe, and it falls in love with us. And that's a divine romance. And it has all the qualities, except exaggerated 100-fold, of human romance. It's because its base is in the human experience, the human heartfelt, vital, bodily experience associated with human relationships. So this is transmuting the human relationship, taking it to a complete different order than would be otherwise available, because there are universal forces at work. Okay. And
Chapter 10, Vibhuti Yoga, the Yoga of Divine Emanations. The Blessed Lord said, Arjuna, since you are dear to me, listen again to my supreme word that I shall reveal to you for your benefit. Neither the gods nor the great seers know the mystery of my origin, because I am the source of all gods and seers.
so the important point here is that in the Hindu tradition, the gods and the seers are not able to know God directly. If you look at the nature of this chapter, it's unique to the human experience. In the Hindu tradition, even the gods have to take birth as human beings before they can move into relationship to that which is the source of them. Because they live in the field of God, of the Supreme Being all the time, they can't know the Supreme Being. There's no separation. They're still fish who are in the water. It's only when we come out of that oneness and end up on the shore that we can actually come to an appreciation of the nature of that which is behind even, is the origin of even the gods and seers. So this is a point in these verses.
When one is able to realize me as the birthless, beginningless Lord of all creatures, he becomes free from delusion, and being free from sin, he is fit to attain liberation.
In this verse, he's speaking of the yoga, this particular yoga. That means when one has a direct experience of the universal forces, even the ego cannot deny it. It's like it is so overwhelming that from that point on, one is relieved of a great deal of doubt, self-doubt, or doubt about the existence of God. Because in the nature of this revelation, it's irrefutable experience that something had happened of an absolute, completely different order than what you've lived at that point, up to this point. So this kind of revelation prepares our system to be able to handle more revelations. So when the universal force comes in, if our lifestyle is conducive, it can grow. These Vibhutis cannot just come and go. They can come and grow. And they begin to transform the body, transform the biochemistry. This is truly the transformation or the transmutation that goes on in the analogy of a caterpillar to a butterfly. It is a fundamental reworking due to energetic forces of the nature of the vehicle in which the consciousness inhabits, such that the consciousness doesn't have to use the mind only or the psychic awareness only. The body and the heart become collaborators in the spiritual journey. So the whole issue of doubt quiets at this stage.
Intellect, knowledge, non-delusion, forgiveness, truth, self-restraint, tranquility, happiness, misery, birth, death, fear, and fearlessness, non-violence, impartiality, contentment, austerity, charity, fame, and defamation. All these manifold conditions of beings arise from me alone.
This is the recognition of the one who comes to this state. Everything we have seen as good, as higher, as noble, as great, is a reflection of the truth that's trying to be revealed, being shown here. It's not like God lives in evil and darkness and destruction, although that is also true. In this case, it's pointing to everything that man has striven for and all the qualities that man have demonstrated that we collectively admire, respect, honor, or enjoy, if those are our experiences, are reflections, radiance of this state of consciousness, that to the extent that we can receive it up to now.
The 7 ancient seers and the 4 Manus, from whom have come all these beings, were born of my mind. One who realizes the truth and power of my divine glory is united with me by unwavering yoga. There is no doubt about this. I am the source of all, and from me all have come. Knowing this, the wise worship me with devotion. Keeping me in their minds and consciousness, they direct all their thoughts towards me and talk with each other about me. Speaking of me only, they are always happy.
When these experiences happen, you don't have to work at renunciation. There is so much intoxication that all you want is more of that. That was my whole experience. For the whole first stage of my journey, it wasn't effort. The ego is a complete collaborator. It said, my God, I hope it never ends. And it was absolutely no effort at all to do what we would call sadhana. It was my delight. Anything that I did that quieted my ego, anything that I did that took me out of the habit of my life, the force would be able to come in more strongly. So I was immediately reinforced to show that as I separated from my human habit and oriented myself to my divine nature, there was a direct link from a limited consciousness to a much greater consciousness. So spiritual practice became effortless. There was no effort. When this stage happens, one becomes so absorbed that that's all you think about. It's all you focus on. You wake up either in the state or waiting for the state or preparing yourself to receive the state. It's a complete absorption. So it's not an effort to try to focus and remember and do your practices and sit and stare at the blank wall for hours and hours at end. It's not a stripping down. There is actually the experience of being added to. So it is not ultimate truth, but it's a very important process of interim truth that takes us out of the more untrue, human, limited possibility into what we might call the divine felt possibility.
To those who are thus ever devoted to me, who worship me with love, to them I give the yoga of intellect, through which they can come to me. Out of my compassion for them, I light the lamp of knowledge in their hearts and destroy the darkness of ignorance.
I give these people who are exclusively devoted to me the yoga of intellect, because the people who open typically from the heart aren't intellectually inclined. They're not discriminating based. They're not analytical. But the Gita says that one who follows the path of the heart will eventually come to the path of the intelligence, of the psychic intelligence, that everything will be revealed to you over the course of time. And this was my experience. My experience was that I would try to understand what was happening at the beginning with my human intelligence, with the extent that I'd been exposed to spirituality, and I recognized that there was very little material in the West, at certain, that pointed to what this was. And it took quite a few, so the years that it followed subsequently was really these series of revelations that occurred. As I shared, like the first revelation where I saw that the entire universe was ordered. That was an experience. It wasn't something that I thought or believed was a good idea. It wasn't a belief. It was a direct encounter with the nature of the fabric of reality. And it was irrevocable. It could not be removed to this day. It's absolutely certain. So we are all interconnected. We're all part of this one matrix. We all have a role to play within that matrix. We all affect each other, and what we do or don't do makes a difference. That the universe has a purpose, a direction, and that we can align with that purpose and find greater and greater happiness and truth and ultimately enlightenment, or we can not align with that truth and become less and less aware, less and less conscious, and more diminished and diluted. So this is how it is. It's as if you can't say it's a gestalt, because that occurs in the mental awareness. It is a whole body knowing of the nature of how things are, over which you cannot get over, and over which you don't recover. So this kind of revelation is what the Gita is saying. And then out of those, the mind subsequently, the intellect subsequently makes sense of it and can speak it and articulate it. So when one speaks from their experience, the information they relay is coming from their direct experience, even though it may have mental content, versus one who is in the awareness where it's a recognition in the plane of the intelligence, in the psychic. It has a complete different frequency and a complete different impact. Okay.
Arjuna said, O Lord, thou art the supreme Brahman, the final abode, exceedingly holy, the supreme spirit, the primal God, unborn and all-pervading. Thus the seers call you the divine Narada, and seers like Asita, Devala, and the great sage Vyasa also say this. O Supreme Being, even you yourself tell me so. Krishna, all this and whatever else you have spoken to me, I believe to be true, O Lord. Verily, neither the gods nor the demons know your manifestation. O Supreme Being, only thou know thyself. O Creator of beings, Lord of beings, God of gods, Lord of the universe, thou art the sustainer of creation. Only you can describe fully your divine glories by which you are pervading in this entire creation. O blessed Lord, how do yogis contemplate on you? Also, how can I know you? On what particular objects shall I meditate on you? Krishna, please tell me in detail your power and glories. I am not satisfied to hear just your nectar-like words.
This is when the devotion is overtaking Arjuna. It's when the devotion is overtaking the seeker. And all it wants is more. All it wants is more. Bring it on. There's this sense of just connecting to something so vast and so wonderful that all you want to know is to know it more totally, more in every detail, in every part of your body. There's this wanting to eat it, wanting to absorb it in a way that's not just an understanding. It's a being thrown into the fire of this devotion. It's terribly intoxicating, terribly absorbing. I've had numbers of times where I fall into the state of God intoxication. And in the Hindu tradition, they are the God mad. They get stuck in that state of intoxication. There was Ramakrishna, the guru for Vivekananda. He lived in a God intoxicated state. Anybody who reads his stories of his intoxication, they say, okay, I want that. You know, forget enlightenment. Whatever he's experiencing, that's what I want to have. The bitch of it is nothing of that sort. Nothing in the area of experience can last forever. But because one comes to a state of relationship to the universe, where the universe is in love with you and you're in love with the universe, it becomes like a familiar bedfellow. It becomes something that's always there. So the passion and the absorption that occurs in that first blush of the divine romance quiets, and it becomes something you live with. But in this place, I don't want to diminish the honeymoon. This is the not to be passed over or dismissed entirely. It's actually, if someone enters into this state, who's ready to go grow with it. I would encourage it. I would allow it to run its entire course. Because that's what my teacher did for years and years. He let me go into my intoxications. He knew in his own experience that it eventually quiets.
The Blessed Lord said, Arjuna, there is no end to my magnitude. Therefore I shall reveal to you only some of the important aspects of my divinity. Now listen to these glories. I am the self abiding in all things. Also, I am the beginning, the middle, and the end of all beings. I am Vishnu among the Adityas. Of light I am the radiant sun. Of the Marutas I am Rachi. And among the heavenly bodies I am the moon. I am the Samaveda among the Vedas. Among the gods I am Vasava. Of the senses I am mind. And in beings I am consciousness. I am Sankara among the Rudras. Of the Yakshas and the Rakshas I am Kubera. Of the Vasus I am fire, and among mountains I am Meru. Arjuna, among the priests I am Vrishapati. Among generals I am Skanda. Among water sources I am the ocean. Among seers I am Bhrigu. Among words I am the monosyllable Om. Of sacrifices I am the sacred chanting, and of the unmoving I am the Himalayas. Of trees I am the banyan tree. Among divine sages I am Narada. I am Chitrathatha among the Gandharvas, and among Siddhas I am Saint Kapila. Among horses I am Uchasasarava, born along with nectar. I am Aravata among the elephants, and I am king among men. Of weapons I am the thunderbolt. Of cows I am Kamadhanu. Among passions I am Kandarpa, the king of passion, and among poisonous snakes I am Vasuki. Among Nagas I am Anatta. Of aquatic beings I am Varuna. Of ancestors I am Araman, and of regulators I am self-control. I am Prahlada among demons. Of reckoners I am time. Among beasts I am lion, and among birds I am Garuda. Of purifiers I am the wind. Among weapon wielders I am Rama. Among sea monsters I am the alligators, and of rivers I am the Ganges. Of created beings I am the beginning, the end, and also the middle. Arjuna, of all knowledge I am the knowledge of the self, and I am the logic of those who debate. I am the first letter of the alphabet. Of compounds I am Dwadwa. I am eternal time. I am the universal dispenser.
Well, I'm having a good time, so I don't know how it is for you, though. Sajamai is pronouncing the words correctly, so it's very satisfying. So, but something of the nature of what this is pointing to, I just wanted to give emphasis to. Because it's the things that stand out, the things that strike us, high or low. It is the new life, it's the death of a loved one. It is the sorrow, the great loss, as well as the great romance, the great love. It is the fulfillment of the accomplishment. It's the striving for the higher possibility. It's the highest ideal. All these are vibhutis. They're access points to something of the divine nature. And they're all pointing to something of an order higher than the one we ordinarily live in. I remember in India, it was a curious time where all my aesthetics had quieted, and I had a 3-month period where it was in the middle of the peak heat season, and I'm living in my little room with no wind, just screens, sweltering pretty much all the time. But I had adapted. And what I was doing is I was taking walks in the middle of the day. I would go out in the middle of the day with my black umbrella, which would get so hot that it would burn, create a blister if I touched the metal parts of it. But at least I didn't get fried. later the Indians and the villagers would talk about this crazy Westerner who was walking when everybody else was hiding in the brush or in their thatch huts, not figuring it out. When I was doing this walk, I would keep thinking of the names of God. Now, I had been chanting the 1,000 names of God, 1,008 names of Vishnu, but I realized, well, they're all pointing to something of the inherent reality in everything. So what I began to do is just start, oh, to you, that is the sky. Oh, it's to you, that is the heat that has my umbrella become a firing iron. To you, that is that in me that can be here. To that which is growing these trees that are somehow surviving this sweltering heat. To that which is sustaining this existence. And I would keep making up names. And something started happening. This was towards the tail end of this 3-month period. It was as if each naming, labeling, word was a prayer, a sending out to a recognition of something greater than this little miserable, dried up, empty place I was in at that particular time. And it wouldn't necessarily be able to take me back into the ecstasies during that time because I was in a different stage of the journey. But it was the one solace that I had in the period I call the void. And in that place, there was this sense, this ability to have some kind of remembrance in this evoking. And this is what Arjuna is asking for. He's asking, how can I know you in detail? How can I, when all this disappears, how can I live this? How can I stay in touch with this in my ordinary consciousness? So that when I'm driving through traffic or shopping in Walmart, I can have means of accessing your divine nature. So it's the same thing. You can say to you that created in these crazy Westerners this incredible number of diversity. I can buy 14 different varieties of pea soup in this one store. It's just you who creates such a multiplicity, that created something that could create such a multiplicity. And how colorful are these labelus, and how there are so many ways we can create this if we just choose to step out of our numbed out relationship with day-to-day life, that we can open up in us a possibility of moving into the relationship of the reality that's behind it. And all the actions that I assure you that will work are the ones that are in awe or wonder in whatever those qualities were, be high or low, negative or positive. The nature of this, the first verses of this chapter, no, it's not here, is that this state takes you beyond good or evil. It takes you beyond virtue and sin. It takes you into a relationship where everything is simply a Vibhuti, an expression of the one divine nature that pervades everything. So this is what Arjuna was asking for. How can I return to remembrance? How can I remember you when I'm not in this particular state? How can I know you in detail in your glories? So now we will continue.
I am the all-erasing death and the unmanifest future. Among feminine qualities, I am fame, prosperity, speech, memory, wisdom, perseverance, and forgiveness. Of chants, I am the Brihat Sama. Of meters, I am Gayatri. Of months, I am Marga Sirsa. Of seasons, I am spring, the season of flowers. I am gambling of the dishonest, splendor of the splendid. I am victory, I am effort, and I am goodness of the good.
I need to stop right there because I just love that verse. Sorry. I'm going to have to say it again. I am gambling of the dishonest. I'm the thievery of the crook. I am the splendor of the splendid. I am victory, I am effort. I'm the goodness of the good and the bad, of the evil. I am all these things. This particular verse just was a great comfort when my ego would get caught up in its ethics and its morality and its judgment and its condemnation or repulsions.
Among the Vrishnas, I am Vasudeva. Among Pandavas, I am Arjuna. Of sages, I am Vyasa. Of seer poets, I am Usana. Of punishers, I am Scepter. I am the guidance of those desirous of victory. Of secrets, I am silence, and I am the knowledge of the wise. Arjuna, I am also the seed of all creatures. There is nothing that could exist without me, whether moving or unmoving.
So, what's being revealed here is the nature of the Supreme Being. These verses are the Supreme Being speaking. So, it is possible for one to enter into this state and from this state describe what it's like to be there. So, in this case, because there's a listening, Krishna is describing what it is to be in the state he is in, because he's also in the divine intoxication with Arjuna. That the two together is what creates this state of consciousness, although temporary, not sustainable, is a glimmer of the nature of the supreme state before its time. And this allows for the soul, for that nature of what it's like to be in that state to be described. So when you read this particular verse, if you can move into the relationship that it's the Supreme Being revealing itself to you, you will be able to create a pathway from whatever your consciousness is now to that consciousness. Just like you say, I'm this person, this miserable, selfish, shallow, impulse-driven, indulgent creature. You can actually say, I am the Supreme Being. As a matter of fact, the I amness that we call the realization of the Brahman, when it occurs within the creation, is a state of being, in which is inclusive and in a profound relationship with all other things, beings that are part of this entire existence. So we're pointing to something that's outside of the box, guys, right? We're pointing to something that's not normal in popular spiritual literature, or if it is, it's lost in the intoxicated poetry or the music of different traditions that are primarily devotional. So how would it be possible to have a spiritual practice where that is what happens to you? We're not in charge of that. We're not in charge of our system's capacity to have that kind of experience. The useful thing, if there's anything out of these verses, is to have a sense of something that currently you may not know nor ever know this lifetime. That sense of it, a sense of a possibility not currently available to you, is enough to move you towards it.
There is no end to my divine glories. I have only revealed these principal glories to you in brief. Whatever thing is glorious, excellent, or prominent, know that it is born of a portion of my splendor. And Arjuna, know it for certain that this whole universe is just a portion of myself. Thus ends the 10th chapter of Gita, entitled The Yoga of Divine Emanations.
All glory to Gurudev. My teacher knew this state. And in India, there are other people who come from that culture where their entire life they were immersed in this relationship to the Supreme Being, through their traditions, through their culture, in such a way that the systems are able, or were able, perhaps less so now that India is getting westernized, to receive this. It can happen only if we're very simple. It can happen only if there's something in us that is not endlessly seeking the complexity and the diversity of this Western world that we live in. It can only come if we're childlike, simple. So it's not something we can make happen. It's not something we can attain. And I believe that for all our delights and wonders here in the West, we have lost something fundamental, something so profoundly nourishing and sustaining that we are where we are, neurotic, anxious, fearful, paranoid, preferring destruction over creation. So there's consequences that really are beyond us, that we're all in a journey. We're heading somewhere, and we're at this stage of the journey, wherever you are who are listening to this. You are where you are, and you cannot be any other place than where you are right now. So the useful way of holding this kind of revelation is to not take it personally, not to use it to compare, not to use it as a way of beating yourself up, but as a recognition that there is a possibility that you do not yet know, if that's the case. Or perhaps you have some reflection of it in your own experience or in your own awareness. There are forces much greater than our little individual ego that's at work here. Even the teacher can only do so much. We're all in a process of evolving and maturing. And what we're pointing to here is one particular aspect of the journey. As I say, the spiritual path has two directions. One of awareness, which uses the psychic intelligence, and one of experience, which integrates the body, the heart, as well as the intelligence and the psychic, but much less so. And the journey is a matter of one developing until it can't go further, and the other has to develop enough so this can go further. It could be the devotion is stronger in someone's system, and maybe the awareness is stronger in someone in their system. The awareness is the path of knowledge, of knowingness, of revelation, of insight. The path of experience is of devotion. It's a feeling, of emotion, of sensation. So in my nature, it was my experience that went first. Not that I didn't have awareness, but relative to the experience, that led. But it wasn't able to go further. It stopped because I needed more awareness. And when the awareness came, it was able to go further. So these are the two tracks. The track of awareness is aspiration. The track of experience is the track of devotion. There are these two tracks we all have to walk. Okay. And with that assurance, or that consolation, I finish this talk. Thank you all for your attention. Love and blessings.